Well, why don't we go ahead and start so that people who've already joined aren't held up. And so this is a new experience for me. Hi, everyone. We really appreciate you joining us today for our talk with Dr. Jerry Freilich. He's going to talk about the secret life of rivers. For those of you who might not know me, my name is Gail Snyder. I'm the founder and executive director of Coalition for the Deschutes. Through our shared vision for the Deschutes, we work with farmers, businesses, recreationists, and other conservation groups to restore the Deschutes River to a healthy condition so that fish, farms, and families can all thrive. I've got that written down, so I can remember that. One of our shared vision partners and a vitally important voice for Central Oregon rivers is the Deschutes Redbands chapter of Trout Unlimited. The Redbands are co-hosting this talk, and at this point, I'd like to invite Sean Piggott, the chapter chair, to say hi to everybody.
Great. Thanks, Gail. I am the president of the local chapter of Trout Unlimited. We call ourselves the Deschutes Redbands. It's a fish we always strive to catch. We have about 634 members in the Deschutes Basin at last count, and we very much appreciate the opportunity to co-host this event and look forward to Jerry's commentary on the ecology of rivers, and hopefully we'll all have great questions to ask. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Gail.
To me, yeah. And so before we hand over to Jerry, just a few things about this Zoom meeting. So you've entered the meeting already muted, and we ask that you stay muted. So, and Jerry also asked that if you've got questions, you just keep them until he gets done with his talk. If you do have a question or a comment when Jerry is done, then please use the raise hand feature in the participants panel. You'll be recognized in the order in which you've raised your hand, and you'll be unmuted by the moderator. And then he'll mute you again when your question has been answered. And by the way, the moderator is my husband, Sid. I don't know. Okay, there you go. The hairy guy. And you can also type in your questions in the chat box. And Sid, again, they will be taken in order with raise hand and chat. And so now, here's Jerry.
Well, hello. Now, I'm not seeing myself right now. Should I be in speaker view? Sid, you're all seeing me? Are you seeing me or you're not? You're seeing Gail. I'm still seeing Gail.
I can see you, Jerry.
I see you,
I
Chris.
see you.
Huh. But why am I not seeing myself if I'm the speaker?
You don't need to.
All right.
Will show the last person who has spoken beside yourself.
Well, I guess. All right, okay. At any rate, hello everyone. I'm Jerry Freilich. I am very pleased to be here representing the Coalition for the Deschutes and happy to have all of you logged on. I am particularly pleased that we've had so many people sign in from the Bend and Central Oregon area, but I understand we also have people far and wide. I know my family members are here and I say hello to them. And also there are, I think, people from Peninsula College in Port Angeles, Washington that may be logged in, and other people from far and wide. So my talk today is called The Secret Life of Rivers. And I'm going to talk about what I call Stream Ecology 101. These are the basics of how streams work. And the thing about it is that it applies not only to streams here in the West, but to streams worldwide. Anywhere there's running water, these same principles apply, and most of the things that happen here also happen worldwide. These are very general ideas. Now, my background is in aquatic entomology. I did my PhD work on stoneflies at Grand Teton National Park back in the 1980s. And since then, I had a long career with the National Park Service. So the things that I'm going to present today are things partly from my own experience, but also from my background in aquatic ecology. I'm going to be showing you a PowerPoint program. So after this point, you won't see my smiling face anymore, but you will see the PowerPoint. And when I'm done, and I think that should take about 30 minutes, maybe 35 minutes, then I will shut off the PowerPoint and you can ask questions and we can talk after I present. So without further ado, here we're going to see the secret life of rivers. Hopefully this will work. Are you all seeing the secret life of rivers right now on your screen? Sid, or somebody, I need to know that it's...
Yes, it's there.
The screen is up?
Yep, the screen is up.
Okay, all right. Well, everybody knows that rivers are like, hold on, I have to find out how I can change these. There we go. People know that rivers are like conduits of water. We think of the river as maybe like a pipe, or in this case, like a flume, where the water comes in at the top, usually in the form of snow or rain, and then it runs down a channel and it empties into the ocean. That's, the general idea of a stream. And then people know that there are fish in the river because obviously a lot of people go fishing. And we know that the fish eat bugs because that's the whole basis of fishing, where you put an object in the water that's supposed to be like a fly or a natural piece of bait of some kind, and the fish bite on it. So this talk was really started out in an interest of appealing to fishing people who know this much about fish and about rivers, and that's about where it stops. So I'm going to go on from there and talk about how much more complicated rivers are than just a pipeline. And it's just a lot more than flies and a lot more than fish. That's where we're going to start. We're going to go on from there. I'm going to present this as a series of mysteries. Now, probably most of you watching me right now are familiar with these two series of books. I know I surely read them when I was younger. So this is going to be a presentation in the theme of like a Nancy Drew or Hardy Boys mystery. There are going to be 4 mysteries. You ready? There's the secret of the leaves, the tale of the hidden tapestry, the mystery of the stones, and the sticky wicket mystery. Are you ready? Okay, it's a little weird doing this talk by Zoom because I can't hear your reactions. Usually I listen to the audience, but I'm just going to pretend that I can hear you. So the first one is going to be the secret of the leaves. How could that be complicated? Well, let's talk about how ecosystems work on land. Everybody knows that the sun is the source of all of our natural ecosystems. That's where the energy comes from. And the sun grows the grass, and then the cows eat the grass, and then we eat the cows. That's pretty obvious to everybody, right? And this is what we call a food chain. And I don't have to talk to an audience like you guys. You're sophisticated viewers, and you know that there's a food chain, and you probably know that it's more complicated than it's just a chain. It's actually what you would call a food web, where different things eat different things. And this is the way it works on land. Well, okay, how does this ecosystem concept work in a stream? Well, it's pretty different. And I think this may be the first of several surprises. As with the dry land, the sun, again, provides the energy for aquatic ecosystems. And it is true that there are green things that grow in the stream. This is what we call primary production. And the green plants do provide some food for some of the things that live in the river. But here's a big surprise. Well, let's first talk about this green stuff you see on the rocks. If you take a knife blade and scrape that green stuff onto a microscope slide, and look at what that green stuff is, you'll see it looks like this under the microscope. A lot of that green stuff growing on the rocks are actually little tiny single-celled plants that are called diatoms. And they have a little silica shell or exoskeleton. And a lot of things in the river do eat this stuff. So the sun and the green things do provide some of the energy. But it turns out that more of the energy important to streams is in the form of the leaves. The things that fall in, blow in, or are washed into the river provide most of the energy for most streams. Now, in the east, probably your stream would look like this. Out here in Oregon, it would probably look like that. Well, whether it's pine needles or deciduous tree leaves, doesn't matter a whole lot, but it's this stuff that falls or blows or gets washed into the river that provide most of the energy in most streams worldwide. Now, I'm not going to, here's an example of a thing that got washed into the river. This grasshopper, this hapless grasshopper, is being eaten by these water striders that are eating it. This is just one example. And the important thing that you're going to get out of this is that there are two kinds of systems: autochthonous and allochthonous systems. Now, I'm only going to talk about four. I'm going to give you four technical terms during this talk, and only four. I'm not going to overburden you with technical terms, but this one, allochthonous, is an important one and the only one that you really need to write down, because I know it's an odd word, but when you start studying stream ecology, this is one of the first things you learn, that it's the things that fall in or blow in that are most important. So let's talk about that a little bit. Here are some leaves that fell into the stream, the one where I was studying it in Grand Teton National Park. These leaves have been in the water for quite a long time. They were a leaf pack that was jammed up against some rocks in the stream and just lodged underwater. And as it turns out, it's not only the leaves themselves that are important, but actually these little microorganisms. This is a photomicrograph showing fungal cells. These are fungi that are growing on the leaves that are submerged in the water. These microorganisms are kind of like the way they describe it when I was in graduate school. They said it's like the peanut butter that's spread on a cracker. Like the leaves that are the foundation of these things are like the bread, and then the fungi and the bacteria that adhere onto it. It's like a biofilm that coats the surface. And that's where the high energy content is. And this has been only discovered in the last, say, 30, 40 years. Before that, this was unknown. But the leaves themselves and the biofilm on top of them are the important source for most stream ecosystems. Now, these two guys are the champion scientists who discovered a lot of this. On the left is Dr. Robin Vanote from the Academy of Natural Sciences in Philadelphia, which is where I went to work when I was a young man. I knew Robin years ago. And on the right is Dr. Wayne Minshall, who's now retired from Idaho State University in Pocatello. The two of them came to visit me when I was working at Joshua Tree National Park. That's the picture you see here. And I felt like the mountain had come to Mohammed, because these two guys are like the biggest name in stream ecology. Their paper, called The River Continuum Concept, put this idea of the things that blow in and fall in and the photosynthesis and all of these different aspects of stream ecology into a single paper, which is now today the most widely cited paper in all of stream ecology. People have criticized it, people have added to it, but it is the foundation of most of our thinking about how streams work. Up in the headwaters of a stream, the stream is likely to be heavily shaded. the trees will grow and cover the river. So there is not that much primary production, the green stuff growing. And then as you go downstream farther, you come to a midsection where there'll be more stuff blowing into the river and more sunlight perhaps reaching the river. And then down in the lower reaches, there may be no shading of the stream, the temperature will be warmer, and the amount of falling in and washing in would be different. It's all complicated. I'm not going to get into the details, but enough to know that the river continuum concept kind of explains the whole thing. So here you have the Deschutes River near here, and you can see it's wider open. But the important thing about this is to realize that the river banks, the valley that includes the river, is like one entity. The river and its banks are tightly linked. So that is the mystery of the leaves. The valley is important to the stream. You can't disconnect the stream from the valley. And I would also argue you can't turn this river on and off like a garden hose, which is what we're doing on the Deschutes River, but we'll get to that later. So going on, let's talk about the hidden tapestry. This tapestry, I went online and just searched for a picture of a tapestry, and I found this one by random chance. It's a very beautiful tapestry, which, as it turns out, I actually saw it in person one time in Paris. It's in the Cluny Museum, and it's a Montsol des Yeux. It's a famous tapestry from the 13th century. So what is the tapestry in a stream? Well, to understand the tapestry of life in a stream, you have to understand the classification of living things. And you probably all seen some kind of mnemonic like this one. This is the one I use. There's a million other ones like it, but you know what I'm talking about here? King Philip can only find green stamps. You probably know what I'm referring to here. It's this. You probably had your own little way of remembering that. Most people do this in high school, and probably you still remember it. So we need to talk about the organization of living things. For example, this animal that you see in the picture, what do you suppose it is? I mean, what kind of thing is this? Well, we know it's an animal, and it is a vertebrate, okay? We know it has a backbone. So it's one of the mammals, clearly. And then beyond that, we know what order it is. We know it's a carnivore, but you may not know exactly what kind of animal it is. So below the order, you come to the families. So let's talk about families of carnivores for a minute. Here are the families, or 5 of the families of carnivores. There are actually more than 5, but you know these 5. So that creature you just saw before probably fits in one of these 5 families, wouldn't you say? And yes, it's probably like that one on the lower right. Here's the point I want to make with this slide. These are families of carnivores. And you don't need to know what species that one in the upper left is, but it's obviously a dog. And the one in the upper right, you don't need to know what kind of bear it is, but it's clearly a bear. The one in the lower left is a kitty cat of some kind. The one in the middle is in the raccoon family, the Procyon for you science folks. And the one in the lower right is some kind of weasel. That's the family Mustelidae. So these are families. And there are many, many different genera and species in each family, but these are family differences. So going back to our stream ecology and the hidden tapestry for a moment, let's look at some stoneflies. These are aquatic animals that live in running water. These are not 9 species of stoneflies. They're not 9 kinds of stoneflies. These are 9 families of stoneflies. Try to get your brain around that. These in this picture are as different from each other as these are from each other. I mean, you would never mistake a cat for a dog, right? Neither would you ever confuse a purlid with a pteronarcid. I mean, they're just completely different. families. And there are many different families and hundreds of species in every family. This is the kind of tapestry I'm talking about. This is a nymph of a stonefly that lives in the water. Here's the winged adult stonefly that comes out and flies around. Here's a nymph of a mayfly. There are 21 families. Look, 650 species in North America. And here's what the winged adult mayfly looks like. And then caddisflies. I'm showing you these because these are the ones that fly fishing people try to imitate with their flies that they put on the end with a hook and try to catch a fish. So these are the kinds of insects that are most known to fishing people. There's so many of these that the scientists tend to break them up into functional feeding groups. There are grazers, like mayflies are grazers. You can think of these two as equivalent right here. So the mayflies live on the rocks in the stream and they eat the green stuff that's growing on there, or they may eat the fungi on the leaf packs. Here's another mayfly. Here's another one still, quite different, but all of them mayflies, and they're grazers. There's another group of aquatic insects that are predators. I always like to think that this stonefly on the left has a kind of a similarity to the leopard on the right. Yeah, kind of the color pattern matches, right? So these are predators. The stonefly eats mayflies. Here's a beautiful stonefly. And here is a stonefly eating this hapless mayfly. They eat them. There are also shredders that take those leaves and the bacteria growing on them, on those leaf packs, and they, like this little side swimmer or amphipod, he's a little kind of almost microscopic shrimp, only a few millimeters long, and they skeletonize the leaves like this, eating both the fungi and the leaf itself. And this big stonefly that most of us know as the salmon fly is also a leaf shredder. And I'm going to talk more about these in a few moments because this is the one that I did my PhD research on, and I'll come back to it in a few minutes. Now, there's another kind of functional group of these aquatic animals that are collectors. The caddisflies are collectors. And the nearest analogy to that is the fisherman who uses a net because caddisflies spin webs. They live in a little house made out of little stones or leaves that they assemble using their silk and saliva to glue these cases together. And then they come out of their case and they spin a web. You see the little like spider web thing there. The caddisfly larva has spun that silken web that catches microscopic particles floating down in the water column. This picture and this one are both taken underwater. So the running water runs into the mouth of these little silken webs. These are silken webs, and this caddisfly eats the things that are trapped on those webs. These are pictures of what the webs look like through a microscope. Each species makes a distinctive pattern of web, specifically aimed at capturing a particular size of food particle, whether they be big bacteria or pieces of whatever. It's amazing specialization among them. There's another group of these collectors that use these little rotating fans. Do you see these hairs on this picture on the left? Can you guys see my mouse moving? I assume you can. These are little animals, little multicellular animals called rotifers. They're everywhere in the water. And these little hairs are used in they rotate around and around, and they capture little particles that are floating through the water column. Here's a video of a rotifer, and you can see those little hairs moving around. And what they're doing is creating a little current to capture those little particles of bacteria down in the water column. And then down inside the animal, you can see the little items being moved into his little stomach inside there. So rotifers are another kind of collectors. Black fly larvae are also collectors. You can see the fan-like appendages that he has here, that he wiggles around in the water to capture floating particles. So the hidden tapestry is the fact that there are thousands of these tiny threads woven together. There are just so many species of things living in the water. I mean, it's just overwhelming, the diversity of them. And the thing that's amazing to most people is, you know, these are worldwide. Every stream in the world except Antarctica. You can go to that stream winter or summer, put a net in the water, turn over the rocks, and collect stoneflies, mayflies, caddisflies, and other things, no matter what time of year and no matter where you are on the face of the earth. It is amazing. Next, we have the mystery of the stones. What about stones? You look at a river and you see what looks like a uniform pile of rocks and the water running over them. And people maybe have this idea that it's as exciting as the gravel in your driveway. Well, this is not true. This is not true at all. The stones in the bottom of the river are the basis of the whole thing, and they're much more complicated than you would realize. Here's a new word. This is a second technical term I'm going to give you. For many years, I was a member of the North American Benthological Society. They have now changed their name because nobody knew what benthological meant. And I'm going to ask you if you have any idea what a benthologist is, and what is the benthos anyway? Well, they've now changed their name to the Society for Freshwater Science, SFS. But for many, many years, it was NABS, the North American Benthological Society. And there was a great debate when they changed the name, because a lot of people felt that the mystery of the name was enough question mark that people would ask the question and then they would become enlightened. But then too many people decided that people had no idea what that was. So here's your second scientific term that you want to learn. The benthos is the bottom of the stream. The benthos refers to the rocks and mud and silt and whatever else is in the bottom of the stream. And this turns out to be unbelievably important. Like taking, for example, stoneflies. This is a typical life cycle of a stonefly. The female lays the eggs above the water. The eggs float to the bottom over there on the left. They're sticky. They stick on the rocks. The little baby nymphs come out of those and they live in the rocks in the bottom of the stream, typically for a year. And then at some point the following spring, and it's different for every species, there are many different patterns, but this is generalized, they come out, they hatch into an adult with wings, and then they fly away, they mate, they lay their eggs, and the cycle is repeated. And most aquatic insects go through a cycle like this. And we're going to concentrate now on the part of this that's underwater, under the rocks. This is the salmon fly, Pteronarcis californica. And this is the one that I did my study on. And this is my favorite of all animals. Here's the winged adult. This is what the winged adult looks like. When these are very large, they get to be as much as 2 inches long. And because they're so large, only the largest fish can eat them. So when the salmon flies are coming out of the river, this is the biggest event in the fly fishing year. And the fly fishing people go nutso, because that's when you go and fish for the biggest fish. Here in Bend, that emergence of the salmon flies is in late May, early June, in the Deschutes River, where I did my study at Grand Teton National Park in a tributary of the Snake River. That was in late June and early July. But these animals, here's where I did my study. Somebody had to do it. I was working for the national park, 3 10-hour days each week. And so I had 4 days free to do my research, which was in that little stream that you're seeing in the foreground right there. And the mountain in the background is the Grand Teton. This is right at the edge of Grand Teton National Park. I studied my stoneflies in the side channel of Pacific Creek. The little section that you're seeing here is about 150 meters long. And what I did was I collected the stoneflies using a backpack electroshocker. If you would try to turn the rocks over in the stream, you would collect maybe 5 of these Terra narcis stoneflies in, I don't know, 15 or 20 minutes. If you put 600 volts of DC current in the water for about 5 seconds, you get 30 of them that come up. They're irritated. They're not killed by this. They're just irritated. They come up out of the stones in the bottom, and they would get swept by the current into my net. And I was able to sit there and put little numbered tags. I tagged 3,000 of those guys and followed them around in a stream, attaching the tags with gel-type super glue. And as I put in the little announcement to this talk today, do not try this at home. It is insanely difficult, time-consuming, and just you're crazy to try this. I was crazy to try it. At first, I put the tags up where you see them on this stonefly, but I found that because the stoneflies dig down into the rocks, that the abrasion of the rocks would scrape away the number. So I later realized if you put them on the back wing cover, then they would be protected by the front wing cover. So I tagged 3,000 of them and recovered about a quarter of them and followed around where they went. And what I was trying to figure out was the stream looks all the same to your eye, but not to the stoneflies. So you see that there are particular places like this place where I'm circling with my mouse here, where there's an obvious zone of attraction. And you would say, well, why do they go there instead of other places? Well, that's the mystery of the stones. Let's suffice it to say that the stream and its wetted area is very, very complicated and more complicated than you would imagine. In the 4 years that I studied these stoneflies, when I caught them in the net, I would tag them and put them back in the water within 10 minutes. Never after I tagged them did I ever see them again until I caught them in a net again. I never saw one walking on the surface of the stream. I went out at night. I even put a cot in the stream in the middle of the night and looked in there with a red light to see if I could see them walking around. I never saw one. They're all doing their life activities down under the rocks where they're invisible. This guy, who is a colleague and who I'm honored to call a friend, Dr. Stanford, became famous for this in the 1970s, when he was the first one to discover the fact that the wetted edge of the stream extends more than 100 meters on each side of the part of running water that you see. There were people near his research lab in Montana that were complaining because these little stoneflies were coming out in the water tap. How would you like to have stoneflies coming out of your water tap? Well, probably most of you would not like that. I would like it, but then I like stoneflies. At any rate, the reason that they were coming out in the water tap was because this hyporheic zone, the wetted area of the stream alongside of the actual stream bed, is where these things can move. Wherever there's wetted space in between the stones, they can go in there. And that was why they were coming out in this well water in these people's houses. And today, Jack is a very, very famous biologist, but that was how he got his claim to fame. So the secret of the stones is that the benthos, which you now know what it is, and the hyporheic, which is the area around the wetted part that you see, the part under the surface, are much more complicated and important than you think. Well, I'm reaching the end here. Our last mystery is going to be the sticky wicket mystery. And the thing about this one is, here's a picture of the Deschutes River, and you see the current flowing down there. You find yourself wondering, how can there be any of these aquatic insects up in the headwaters of a stream. Because the water is so violent and the current is so strong, how come things are not just automatically all washed away down to the lower reaches of the river? In fact, how do they survive in there at all? And that is our next mystery. I'm going to ask you, in a stream, where is the fastest water? And you can see from this chart that the fastest water current is in the middle of the stream and towards the top. And then as you move closer and closer to the bottom of the river, the water velocity goes down and down and down. And why is that? Why would the stream get slower as you get to the bottom? The answer is friction. Friction. Because the water is rubbing against the benthos and it slows the water velocity down. And as it turns out, when you get very, very, very close to the surface of the rocks, that the water velocity becomes so slow, it's almost like there's no velocity at all. So if your body shape is very flattened and you stay right next to the rock, you are in a zone that's called the boundary layer. And this mayfly is one good example. Here's another, a bigger picture of that same thing. This is Epeorus, very, very flat mayfly. The boundary layer. Here's I think the final scientific thing that I'm going to ask you to kind of remember. So we have allochthonous, and we have the boundary layer and the benthos. The boundary layer. By staying very close to the surface of the rocks, they can move around in there and not be swept away by the current, because there basically is no current so long as they stay either under the rocks or close to the rocks. Now, there is another thing, and I'm not going to dwell on this more than a moment, but just to say that the drift is another phenomenon. We know that some insects purposely allow themselves to release from the rocks and to be carried downstream at particular times of day. And there are various reasons for this. We also know that many aquatic insects, when they hatch out as winged adults, they fly upstream in a pattern. It's just a pattern to go upstream. So even those that drift purposely in the evening, usually, that's what this graph shows, most of them fly upstream. And that is the way that streams stay populated by all of these things. So that was the sticky wicket mystery. The boundary layer, upstream flight, and body adaptations all allow these things to avoid being swept away. So I've reached the end of my mysteries, and I think that most of you now will have a little bit different understanding of how streams work. But there are many, many more mysteries. I always ask people that are in my audiences, I always say, do you have a PhD? And if they say no, I say, would you like one? Well, just study any one of these things. These are all different mysteries. And any one of them is a perfectly rich field for science. They're making new discoveries in these areas every day. But listen to check this out. As we think about the treatment of our rivers, we are bound in by what many people refer to as water rights. I don't use the term water rights. I prefer to think of them as water privileges. But nonetheless, water law was started in the late 1800s in the United States, and we are stuck with the effects of those water laws, which I consider enormously outdated. I mean, how to change that is a subject for a longer lecture. But at any rate, none of the things that that I showed you in this talk this afternoon were known when those water rights were put into law. You know that I've been talking in kind of general terms and without being very specific about any of this, but everything that I've talked about in this talk is based on not dozens, but hundreds, even thousands of scientific technical papers. All of it is data-driven and has been painstakingly worked out by scientists in the 120 years, since water law went into effect. So this is me. You can see my my email address obviously shows my respect for stoneflies. You're welcome to contact me. I will be answering questions here, but talking today for the Coalition for the Deschutes. We ask you to join us if you're so inclined. And I think Gail will be happy to answer questions directed to her. Here's the motto of my organization. And at this point, I'm going to stop. And anybody who wants to make a discussion, we can